All right, let's jump right into this explainer. If you're looking to visit, live, or maybe even invest in Vietnam, you know the rules on the ground can change incredibly fast. And let's be real, internet rumors definitely don't help. So today, we're cutting through all that noise. We're going to give you the precise, up-to-date legal realities for navigating entry, business, and daily life in Vietnam.
To make sense of all these regulations, we've broken our roadmap down into 5 clear steps. We'll cover navigating Vietnam's entry rules, paths to Vietnamese citizenship, work visas and residency, investing and doing business, and finally, daily life and travel. Let's get to it.
Starting off with Part 1, Navigating Vietnam's Entry Rules. Let's look at the absolute basics of legally crossing the border and clear up some major confusion right out of the gate.
We absolutely need to start by addressing a super common and persistent rumor circulating online about customs. If you've been scrolling through travel forums lately, you've probably seen panicked posts asking if a health declaration is still required to enter the country, along with questions about vaccinations and health checks at the airport.
Well, here is where internet myths clash with actual policy. That health declaration, it's a total relic of the past, completely fake news today. But here's the legal reality. You absolutely must submit an electronic pre-arrival card 72 hours before you land. The official website can honestly be a bit laggy and unintuitive, so getting it done well in advance and printing out your QR code is absolutely essential to avoid major headaches and delays at immigration.
Now, once you've got your entry card sorted, you're going to need the right visa. If you're planning a longer stay, say 3 months, and want to travel around Southeast Asia while keeping Vietnam as your home base, you'll want to apply for a 90-day multiple-entry e-visa. This is a real game changer. It effectively replaces the need for those stressful, immediate border runs, letting you bounce around the region and come back seamlessly for up to 3 months.
Moving on to Part 2, Paths to Vietnamese Citizenship. Let's map out the long-term options for anyone hoping to establish permanent roots or reclaim their heritage.
Here's the deal. You can't just buy your way into a Vietnamese passport. The reality is incredibly strict. There are basically 3 distinct paths to obtaining citizenship. You must either be married to a Vietnamese citizen, be born in Vietnam, which requires a valid birth certificate or birth extract, or have both parents recognized as Vietnamese citizens. If you don't fit perfectly into one of these 3 specific categories, you'll need to look into temporary residency options instead, which we're going to cover in just a second. But first, for adoptees returning to Vietnam, even those born as far back as 1964 or 1999, regaining citizenship involves a specific sequential bureaucratic process. First, you need to identify your birth city and the hospital or orphanage. Then, you secure witnesses, like temple, church, or orphanage staff. Next, you apply for a government-issued birth extract. Finally, you submit those documents to the consulate for a passport. If you don't have your original paperwork, that birth extract is your golden ticket. It turns what could be an overwhelming emotional journey into a manageable legal checklist.
All right, Part 3, Work Visas and Residency. Once you're legally inside the country, securing the right to work and stay long-term is the very next major hurdle. And this brings up a huge question we hear all the time. When will Vietnam introduce a dedicated retirement visa? So many prospective expats are just waiting for a Thai or Malaysian-style retirement visa so they can bring their pensions and relax on the beach. But let's look at some underlying data to understand why that isn't happening anytime soon.
8.83%. That incredibly impressive number is Vietnam's recent quarterly GDP growth. It's a massive figure that outpaces a lot of neighboring countries, and it directly drives their strict immigration priorities.
See, Vietnam is heavily prioritizing foreign direct investment and aiming for G20 status by 2045. Because their main goal is rapid economic stimulation and job creation, legitimate work permits and investor visas are taking absolute priority. This pushes retirement visas way down the list. Simply put, if you aren't helping them hit that G20 status by 2045, they just don't prioritize you lounging on their beaches for the next decade.
And this economic focus brings us to a really critical warning about compliance. Immigration scrutiny is tightening up fast. We're seeing a clear divide between compliant workers who hold valid work permits and temporary residence cards linked to verified companies and high-risk nomads. Just like we've seen in Bali, content creators and remote workers earning foreign income while flaunting the rules on tourist visas are facing potential crackdowns, fines, and even deportation. In the past, people used shell companies to sponsor residence cards without actually working there, but authorities are catching on. Renewals are being heavily restricted, so keeping your employment status completely legit is absolutely key.
Next up, Part 4, Investing and Doing Business.
Let's dive into what it actually takes to inject capital, buy property, or start an enterprise in this booming economy.
Let's talk real estate, because the rules for foreign and local joint property ownership are incredibly nuanced here. Property is legally classified under a strict 30% foreign quota. On top of that, foreigners are entirely prohibited from owning land directly. And if you do buy a physical structure, you can generally only resell it to another foreigner, which seriously limits your buyer pool. Even if a foreign husband buys property jointly with a Vietnamese wife, these strict limitations still apply. So you're definitely going to want to consult legal counsel about alternative strategies, like nominee agreements, before jumping in.
What about starting a business, like setting up a regulated English language center? Unlike an unregulated IT training gig, educating youth requires a very specific sequential approval process. First, you secure an investment registration certificate. Second, you obtain an enterprise registration certificate and a tax ID. Third, you have to secure a venue that meets strict fire safety protocols. And finally, you must pass Ministry of Education curriculum and staff audits. It's a highly lucrative market for sure, but it is heavily gated. You have to budget carefully for those specific sublicenses right alongside your standard accounting and legal fees.
And hey, if you think you can just roll up a cute street food cart and start selling noodles to bypass all that corporate compliance, think again. Even a simple roadside stall requires a formally registered company, a tax ID, paid rents, and local permits. It perfectly illustrates how deeply regulated the local market is. There are literally no legal shortcuts to bypass the Ministry of Transportation and local police requirements.
Finally, Part 5, Daily Life and Travel. Let's transition away from all that corporate compliance and answer a few rapid-fire lifestyle questions to round out your roadmap.
Here's a massive one. Can you legally drive in Vietnam using an international driving permit? The rules of the road here are a huge shock to a lot of expats who just assume the paperwork from their home country will keep them out of trouble with the traffic police.
Well, the reality is that your standard 1968 Vienna Convention international permit is largely unrecognized by local authorities. What you actually need is a converted Vietnamese driver's license. To truly protect yourself on a motorbike or in a car, you absolutely must go through the legal process to convert your home license to a mandatory domestic one, and this will be tied directly to the length of your visa. Before you wrap up your trip or decide where to settle down permanently, we highly recommend exploring outside the massive hubs of Ho Chi Minh City or Hanoi. The country offers so many drastically different experiences. In the Central Highlands, places like Dalat offer cool 17 to 23-degree weather, mountain lakes, and organic produce. On the South Central coast, Nha Trang gives you beach city vibes with sailing and deep-sea snorkeling. Down in the Deep South, the Mekong Delta offers amazing countryside culture and incredible fresh seafood. And on the Central Coast, Quy Nhon is a rising economic hub with a deep-sea port and luxury hotels. It's a wonderfully diverse country.
So, it all comes down to this. Are you truly prepared to navigate the legal realities of your Vietnamese journey? As Vietnam rockets toward G20 status, its borders are becoming increasingly filtered for those who can actively contribute. Mastering this bureaucratic roadmap is the true secret to thriving here. So ask yourself, is the dream of a cheap, easygoing expat life in Southeast Asia dead, or is it just evolving for those willing to play by the new rules? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.